Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into one of the most urgent and revealing topics about the future of Russia's war efforts. How the country's military machine, economy, and political system are being stretched to their absolute limit. The title of today's discussion says it all. From tanks to taxes. Why Russia can't sustain its war by 2026. This isn't just about ammunition or equipment. It's about a nation that's running out of money, manpower, and morale. Let's break down why experts believe the Russian war effort could crumble within the next year. Since the beginning of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Russia has poured enormous resources into its war machine. Billions of dollars have been spent to replace lost equipment, maintain troop supplies, and keep the economy afloat despite unprecedented Western sanctions. But every war has a cost, and Russia's costs are rising faster than it can afford. Analysts say the Kremlin has entered a stage where it's no longer fighting a war it can win. It's fighting a war it can barely afford to continue. The first and most visible problem is Russia's defense industry. When the invasion began, Moscow assumed it could rely on a massive reserve of old Soviet equipment to keep its forces armed. That strategy worked briefly, but years later, the warehouses are nearly empty. Tanks, artillery shells, and aircraft are being pulled from decades-old storage, often in poor condition. Reports from the battlefield show that some of these machines break down faster than they can be repaired. Russia's own officials have admitted that production can't keep up with demand. Factories once designed for large-scale production are now running 24/7, but they face serious challenges: a shortage of skilled workers, a lack of imported parts, and limited access to high-end technology. Sanctions have cut Russia off from Western microchips, industrial machinery, and materials that were once essential to modern weapons. To compensate, Moscow has turned to countries like Iran and North Korea for drones and ammunition. This has given temporary relief, but it's not a sustainable strategy. Beyond military equipment, the human cost is even higher. Russia's army has been forced to recruit from prisons, rural areas, and ethnic minorities to fill its ranks. The average age of a Russian soldier keeps rising as younger citizens flee the country or avoid mobilization. Families across Russia are mourning sons who were sent to war with little training and outdated weapons. As the war drags on, public enthusiasm fades, and even loyal citizens are questioning how long this can continue.
Then comes the economic side, the taxes, inflation, and shrinking economy that are quietly eroding Russia's stability from within. The government has increased defense spending to nearly half of its total budget, leaving less for health care, education, and infrastructure. Prices for everyday goods have soared, and the ruble has lost much of its value. Despite efforts to show resilience, Russian citizens are feeling the squeeze like never before. Energy exports, once the lifeline of the Russian economy, have been hit hard by Western restrictions. Europe has largely weaned itself off Russian oil and gas, forcing Moscow to sell at discounted rates to China and India. These sales bring in some revenue, but far less than before. Oil profits that once funded social programs and war expenses are now insufficient. As a result, the Kremlin is increasingly relying on taxes and borrowing to fill the gap, something that can't go on forever. Experts predict that by 2026, Russia's economy will face a severe fiscal crisis. The government will struggle to pay soldiers, maintain equipment, and fund its sprawling bureaucracy. The military-industrial complex will reach a point where it can no longer sustain production levels. Already, Russian officials are quietly warning of budget shortfalls and growing debt. The illusion of stability is maintained through propaganda, but behind the scenes, cracks are widening. There's also the issue of technology and innovation. Before the war, Russia imported much of its advanced machinery and electronic components from Europe, Japan, and the United States. Those supply lines are now broken. Domestic substitutes exist, but they're far less efficient. Every new tank, missile, or aircraft Russia produces today is more expensive and less capable than it used to be. This technological regression is one of the biggest long-term threats to its war effort. Another major concern is Russia's growing isolation. Once considered a global power with strong trade links, Russia is now increasingly dependent on a few partners: China, Iran, and North Korea. But these relationships are not equal. China buys energy at bargain prices and sells manufactured goods at high markups. Iran and North Korea offer weapons and drones, but their quality and reliability are questionable. Russia's dependence on these nations underscores its weakened position on the global stage. Internally, the strain is taking a toll on society. As the government diverts funds to the military, social programs are being cut back. Pensioners face shrinking benefits, teachers and doctors complain about unpaid wages, and regional governments are struggling to fund basic services. In some parts of Russia, infrastructure is literally falling apart, bridges, roads, and hospitals that haven't seen maintenance in decades. The war economy is consuming everything else. Propaganda has been the glue holding the system together. State-controlled media paints the conflict as a noble fight against the West, but even that narrative is wearing thin. Russian citizens can see the rising costs, the empty shelves, and the endless funerals. For many, the question is no longer whether the war is just, but whether it's worth the suffering. Dissent is still dangerous, but quiet discontent is spreading. Corruption has also played a huge role in draining Russia's resources. Billions allocated for weapons, logistics, and repairs have been lost to theft or mismanagement. Investigations have revealed cases where military officials inflated prices or delivered substandard materials. In a system where loyalty matters more than competence, inefficiency thrives. This corruption ensures that even the money Russia does have isn't being used effectively. Demographically, the situation is dire. Russia's population was already declining before the war, and now the losses are accelerating. Tens of thousands of men have been killed or seriously wounded, and hundreds of thousands more have fled abroad to avoid conscription. This brain drain affects not just the military, but the entire economy. Factories lack workers, universities lose students, and small businesses are closing. By 2026, the labor shortage could become one of Russia's most critical weaknesses. Another factor often overlooked is Russia's reliance on imported food and agricultural machinery. While the country produces a lot of grain, it depends heavily on Western equipment and fertilizers. Sanctions have disrupted these imports, reducing efficiency in farming. Even food security, something once considered safe, is becoming uncertain in parts of the country. Inflation in grocery prices continues to climb, hurting ordinary families. At the same time, the Kremlin's attempts to project confidence are becoming increasingly desperate. Announcements about new weapons or economic partnerships often hide deeper problems. The government is trying to keep up appearances while quietly implementing new taxes, price controls, and military drafts. These measures reveal a leadership struggling to balance between maintaining power and avoiding social unrest. The international community continues to play a role in shaping this outcome. Western nations are maintaining sanctions, supplying Ukraine, and tightening restrictions on Russian imports. Each new sanction further isolates the Russian economy and slows its recovery. While Russia has adapted to some degree, the cumulative effect of these measures is undeniable. Over time, they are grinding down the economic foundation of the war effort. By 2026, Russia could face a perfect storm: depleted reserves, exhausted soldiers, failing industries, and growing domestic discontent. Even if the government manages to hold power, the cost of doing so will be immense. The war that was meant to strengthen Russia's global position may instead become the reason for its long-term decline. Yet, despite all of this, the Kremlin continues to double down. Instead of seeking peace, it pours more resources into escalation. This choice comes with a heavy price. Every missile launched, every tank built, and every soldier deployed pushes the nation deeper into economic ruin. Experts believe that if this trend continues, Russia may reach a breaking point where the costs of war outweigh its ability to continue it. There's also a psychological factor at play. The Russian leadership has tied its political survival to the idea of victory, meaning retreat or compromise is seen as weakness. This mindset ensures that the war drags on, even as the consequences grow worse. But history shows that no regime can survive indefinitely when the economy collapses and the people lose faith. The collapse won't necessarily happen overnight. It may come gradually, with more budget cuts, rising taxes, unpaid wages, and silent protests. But by 2026, analysts predict that the strain will become visible to the world. Russia will still exist, of course, but it will be a weakened version of itself, drained, isolated, and struggling to recover from years of war and mismanagement. In the end, the phrase "from tanks to taxes" perfectly captures the transformation happening inside Russia. What began as a military campaign is now an economic and social battle for survival. The tanks rolling toward Ukraine were only the beginning. Now, the Kremlin is fighting on every front: financial, industrial, and political. And as the war continues, the cost of keeping it alive may be the very thing that destroys it. The lesson here is clear: no nation, no matter how powerful, can sustain endless conflict without consequences. Russia's current trajectory shows how overreach, corruption, and isolation can bring even a major power to its knees. As 2026 approaches, the world will be watching to see whether Russia can adapt or whether its own system will collapse under the weight of war. Thank you for watching, and if you found this analysis insightful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more updates on global issues and geopolitical developments.